The Meanest Doll in the World. Chapter 5. Miss Feldman Rules. The night that Annabelle and Tiffany spent in Kate's room was like no other Annabelle can remember. At first, Annabelle would do nothing but worry. She worried that Kate would know she was missing. She worried that Nora would notice that Tiffany was missing. She worried about what the humans would think and whether the rest of their families could go in doll state because of what the girls had done. And of course, she worried about the dolls and the fun crafts, certain they would be terrified. Although, as Tiffany pointed out, Auntie Sarah must have seen the girls disappear into the backpack. She would be able to figure out where they were. Eventually, Annabelle managed to stop worrying. Once she and Tiffany were certain the building was empty, Tiffany drove them through the hallway in a wooden dump truck. They borrowed from Mrs. Edkatzer's room. The investigated the cafeteria, the gym, the nurse's office, and Principal Hale's office. They read some books in the library. They looked at each other through a magnifying glass. Class in room 201. They shouted and sang as loudly as they pleased. At last, they decided to locate Kate's room. They wanted to be able to watch Kate arise the next morning. When they finally came across a classroom with display of family photos and bulletin board, they saw a picture of Kate and Nora and their parents and Grandma Catherine. They knew they were in the right place. They looked around until they found a cardboard cartoon. It was labeled Misk. It had no lid, and it was full of dusty papers and rubber bands, and pencils of boxes of chalk. Best of all, several small holes had been poked in the sides, perfect for seeing without being seen. The girls didn't know what Misk meant, but they decided it probably wasn't important, so they crawled into the cart and settled down for the night. In the morning, they watched as the darkness in the room lightened to gray, and then as sunshine crept in, pretty soon Annabelle thought Kate would be here. Annabelle knew she would feel better just seeing Kate. The clock on the wall said 8 o'clock exactly. When Annabelle heard footprints in the hall, she nudged Tiffany. For a moment later, a tall woman carrying a thermos and 2 heavy tote bags walked into the room and set her things down on the teacher's desk. That must be Miss Feldman, Annabelle whispered to Tiffany. She looked at Mrs. Feldman with interest. Kate explained to love her 4th grade teacher. Annabelle had heard Kate tell Grandma Catherine that Mrs. Feldman was nice and fair and not mean and always listened and didn't have a teacher's pet, and also that she thought up fun projects for Kate and her classmates. The dolls watched Mrs. Feldman pour herself a cup of coffee from the thermos, then worked at her desk. After a while, she stood up. She wrote a list of words on the green chalkboard behind her. She found a book and marked a place in it. She fed a hamster playing in a cage near her desk. She had pulled a sheaf of papers out of a folder and was starting to read them when Annabelle heard noisy voices in the hallway. Mrs. Feldman glanced up. "Hi, Mrs. Feldman," called 2 boys as they ran into the classroom. "Good morning, James. Good morning, Ben. Are you ready to start new project today?" "Yes," replied James, "and I know who I'm going to interview. My great-aunt Bess. She used to play baseball." 3 more children entered the room. Then Annabelle looked eagerly for Kate. She squirmed a wiggle. "What are you doing?" whispered Tiffany. "Hold still. I'm trying to see. Where's Kate?" "She'll be here." Annabelle watched as 3 more boys and 4 girls entered the room. "No, Kate. Where is she?" asked Annabelle, and suddenly there was Kate. She skipped into the room with 2 other girls. "Good morning, Kate. Good morning, Harmony. Good morning, Ananya," said Mrs. Feldman. "Harmony and Ananya, those other girls, Harmony and Ananya," exclaimed Annabelle. "Annabelle," Tiffany hissed, "you really have to be quiet. Someone's going to hear us. You don't want to get into doll state today. Do you? If that happened, we'd be stuck here for 3 more days, because today is Friday, and you wouldn't want to come around until tomorrow, which would be Saturday. And okay, said Annabelle, but also didn't feel grumpy. Only excited about finally seeing Kate and seeing her around the house on Weatherly Lane. This was such a wonderful opportunity that Annabelle even forgot about her family, who she was certain she must be very, very worried come back home in the dollhouse. Though the hole in the box, Annabelle saw Kate sit at her desk and put some papers and books inside it. Then she pulled something out of her pocket, leaned over, and tapped Hermione, who was sitting at the desk next to her. "Cool," said Hermione. "Oh, cool," said Ananya, as she joined them. "Oh, cool," said a singing voice from behind them. Kate, Hermione, and Ananya turned back sharply, and Kate stuck her hand behind in her pocket. "Go away, Francine," said Ananya. Annabelle nudged Tiffany, who nodded. Here was awful Francine. She didn't look awful, though, Annabelle thought, just like any other kid in the classroom. "Nice socks," Francine said to Kate. "Where'd they come from? The baby department?" "No," exclaimed Kate. Francine, I could see you at my desk for a minute," said Mrs. Feldman. Francine made a face at Kate and then approached the teacher's desk. "Yes, Mrs. Feldman?" she said softly. Mrs. Feldman looked very gravely at Dancing. "I am thinking of something that is in the lobby of our school," she said. "Something on the wall. Do you want to know what it is?" Francine screwed up her face for a moment, Annabelle thought she might give Mrs. Feldman a smart answer like paint. But finally she said, "Our pride sign." "That's right. Tell me what our pride sign says, please." Francine let out a great sigh. "Friendship, respect, trust, responsibility, kindness," she recited. "Yes, and when I heard you speaking to your classmates the way you spoke to Kate just now, I think you have forgotten about the sign and our class friendship rules. How do you think Kate feels when you talk to her like that? Did she look happy?" "No," replied Francine. Mrs. Feldman didn't say anything, so finally Francine added, "She looked like her feelings were hurt, and hurting someone's feeling on purpose is not allowed in this room. Please remember that, Francine." "Okay." Annabelle watched, fascinated. No wonder Kate sometimes said Mrs. Feldman's rules. Tiffany also watching, of course, and now she turned to Annabelle in the box, grinned, and raised her fist in the air. Mrs. Feldman called Kate to her desk, too. Then, "Kate," she said, "Francine has something to say to you." "I'm sorry, Kate," said Francine. Annabelle thought Francine sounded like Talkin' Tammy, a doll Nora used to own. She had not been living in a living doll. Thank goodness. When Nora pulled a string in the back of Talkin' Tammy's neck, the doll said, "I'm hungry," or "nighty-night," or "bye-bye," or "I love you," all the same flat, dull voice. "Francine doesn't mean it," Annabelle whispered to Tiffany. "I wonder why she's so nasty." "She's a bully," replied Tiffany. A bell rang, causing Annabelle to jump slightly. Mrs. Feldman called the class to order. Then Annabelle and Tiffany spent the next few hours watching Kate and learning about nouns and the 13 colonies. And tall tales of multiplication. Annabelle was wiggling with excitement again. She wished she could somehow attend a school for dolls. She knew if she could go to school, she would never be bored again. She wished, too, that Auntie Sarah were with her. Auntie Sarah would love 4th grade. All at the same, when another bell rang later in the morning and Kate's class left their room for lunch and recess. Annabelle and Tiffany lost no time scrambling out of the cartoon. Watching Kate in school was great, but Annabelle was desperate to see her family again. Kate's room was now empty and silent. Mrs. Feldman had even turned out the lights as she followed her class into the hall. "The coast is clear," whispered Tiffany. "Okay, but stick to the walls in case we have to hide suddenly," said Annabelle. As quickly as they could, Annabelle and Tiffany made their way to the door of the room. They peeked out into the hallway, Quiet, so once again, they sunk through the little tunnel between the wall and the shoes and the book bags and backpacks on the floor. All right, said Tiffany. Now comes the hard part. We have to cross the hallway. Kate's things are over there. Annabelle looked up and down the hall. Okay, go, she cried. The dolls dashed across the open space to the other side of the hall. Look, said Tiffany when they had safely reached the opposite wall. The scarf is still here. Perfect, replied Annabelle. She and Tiffany stood on the top of the scarf. Above them was a coat, and that coat was dangling from straps of a backpack. Okay, we go up. Thanks, said Tiffany. And the dolls reached and grabbed the bottom of the coat more easily than Annabelle had ever thought would even be responsible. Kate must have worn a different coat today. Annabelle decided this one didn't have as many buttons. But though it had enough, just enough to allow Annabelle and Tiffany to scramble upward. When the dolls reached the collar of the coat, they grabbed the straps of the backpack and began to climb. They had almost reached the top of the straps when the bell rang, and suddenly the hallway was flooded with children and teachers. Quick! Cried Annabelle, alarmed. Hide in here, she said. She and Tiffany drove into the nearest zipped compartment of the backpack. It's kind of stuffy in here, said Tiffany, squirming to find an uncomfortable position. I know, but we can't let anyone see us. Besides, there's nothing else in this pocket. No rocks or chewed up pencils. We have all the place to ourselves. That's true, said Tiffany. And so the dolls settled in wait for Kate to take them home. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you had a nice